Finally, we are in. No? Sorry for some glitches. There are things beyond our control. No? Pope Francis once said, if you want to see Jesus, if you want to meet Jesus, knock at the heart of his mother Mary. And surely this mother and our mother will bring you where her son is. Precisely earlier, we exactly did the same. We call on the Blessed Virgin Mary to intercede for us. And now we are here. Welcome. After some time, we have a pause on our webinar series because we have to plan it out and replan as we get nearer the heart of the event, the April celebration we have. And now we are done with actually the series, and we remember, we believe, we celebrate. And we've been praying since late last year that we will have resource speakers outside of Cebu, because the one we had in our previous webinars are speakers, resources from Cebu. Of course, no, they are very much fit for the topics we had. And now, you are so grateful. Finally, we have one speaker from outside of Cebu, because this celebration, as we all know, is not just national, it is even international. So we are so grateful to have with us this afternoon to talk about Marian devotion, piety, in this 500 years of Christianity celebration. A priest from the Diocese of Malolos. And in Malolos, he is from Hagonoy, Bulacan. And earlier we talked, we are so happy, and we said, how is our bishop there from Cebu, Bishop Dennis Villarojo? Our speaker studied for his priesthood formation in San Jose Seminary, Ateneo de Manila, and was ordained to the priesthood in 1965. Now you have now a hint of how young our speaker is. And he has an MA in philosophy, doctorate in sacred theology, and diplomate in liturgy from Trier, Germany. He was formerly the Dean of Theology in the San Carlos Seminary Graduate School of Theology, Makati, Manila, and also in the Immaculate Conception Major Seminary Graduate School of Theology, Quiguinto, Bulacan. A recipient of San Jose Award 2009 as an outstanding alumnus of San Jose Seminary. And also, he has been writing books, and one of those, his latest, is on shaping the Filipino Marian piety. This book was awarded as the best book in theology by the Catholic Book Award 2017. Presently, Professor of Theology at the Loyola School of Theology, Ateneo de Manila. You know, if you have to read all this long list of credentials, the whole afternoon is not enough. No, that's why we are so happy to have with us. Thank you for accepting our invitation through the intercession of Mary, the Mother of God, and our Mother, our sharer, devotee, a Marian devotee, a friend. For this afternoon, please help me welcome Monsignor Sabino A. Venco Jr.
Magandang hapon po. Good afternoon to everyone. And greeting from Antipolo, where I am now residing, and to my friends in Cebu, and to all the participants in this webinar. Salamat po sa inyo, and may the Lord be with you. The topic of marriage in the 500 years of Christianity in our country is a very interesting subject and a very challenging one. We should avoid trying to pat ourselves on the back automatically or just concentrate on the fascinating, exciting stories like apparitions and miracles. Rather, let us be a bit more theological and discerning, if I may suggest, for this afternoon's brief webinar. In theology today, we say that unless something is integrated into the culture of the people, it is not yet really part of their lives. So enculturation today is a hashtag for the work of evangelization and Christianization. And the Holy Father has made very urgent call, as well as the FABC, the Federation of Asian Bishops Conferences, and our own Bishops Conference, that we must taking the task, the mission of the entire church. Evangelization cannot be without enculturation. And so in our popular religiosity, in the piety of our people, historically came to be gradually integrated. Our milieu into our way of life. And it is of great interest that all these things started in Cebu. Okay, the origin of this series of webinars. Antonio Pigapetta, the eyewitness and official chronicler of the Armada de Molucca, as the expeditionary force under the command of Ferdinand Magellan was then called Armada de Molucca. In its first very historic circumnavigation of the world, they narrated to us that after staying for 7 days in Masawa by Butuan, they proceeded northwest in the company of the king of Masawa, who has told them very much about the larger port of Cebu, where there is much trading going on, and where the Spaniards therefore hope to have the provisions necessary more available. And so, accompanied by the king of Masawa, they then proceeded to Cebu, where the close relative of the king of Masawa, the king of Cebu, welcomed them. And it is here that Mary's role in the history of the Christianization of our people became explicitly part of the narration. We are told, for example, that on April the 14th, 1521, that was a Sunday morning, Ferdinand Magellan set about to fulfill what he had been discussing with the two kings. The king of Cebu, together with his relative, his cousin, the king of Masawa, and the other chieftains in Cebu, that
what they have expressed earlier, they would like to become Christians and therefore friends of these foreigners, of these newly arrived Europeans. And if I may quote directly from the account by Antonio Pigafetta as translated and made available to us in Blair and Robertson volumes, we read the following. The captain told the king through the interpreter that he thanked God for inspiring him to become a Christian. And now he would more easily conquer his enemies than before. It's a very interesting note that Magellan kept promising the king of Cebu that if he would become a Christian, he would be a victorious leader against his enemies. The king replied he wished to become a Christian, but that some of his chiefs did not wish to obey because they said that they were as good men as he. Then our captain had all the chiefs of the king called and told them that unless they obeyed the king as their king, he would have them killed and would give their possessions to the king. This is just to give to us the stark reality of the so-called Christianization, that here it went along with the sword, the coming of the cross. And concretely, it meant for the leaders among the natives the threat of destruction, and that in conjunction with either you become a Christian or you risk your own life, your own position. And so after that long discussion, the king, the captain then told them that if they wish to become Christians, as they had declared, finally on April the 14th, they must burn all their idols and set up a cross in their place. So now the requirements. First, get rid of their old religion and then start putting up the symbols of the new religion, the religion of Magellan, the religion of the King of Spain, the King of Magellan. And that they must adore that cross daily with clasped hands. And every morning, after the Spaniards' custom, they were to make the sign of the cross, and so forth and so on. Now, let us proceed to the first baptism. The captain led the king by the hand to the platform while speaking these good words in order to baptize him. He told the king that he would call him Don Carlo after his sovereign, the emperor. The prince, Don Fernando, after the emperor's brother. The king of Masawa. The king of Masawa had remained in Cebu. Yohani. A chief, Fernando, after our chief. That is to say, the captain. And the others, now one name and now another. 500 men were baptized before Mass. So that is what is recorded by Pigafetta. After the conclusion of the Mass, the captain invited the king and some of the chiefs to dinner, but they refused, accompanying us, however, to the shore. After dinner, the priest and some of the others went ashore to baptize the queen, who came with 40 women. She was shown afterwards an image of Our Lady. And here is the first entrance of the Mother of Jesus in the narration of the history of the Christianization of the Philippines. The Queen of Cebu was shown an image of Our Lady, a very beautiful wooden child Jesus, and a cross. Thereupon, she was overcome with contrition and asked for baptism amid tears. We name her Johanna after the emperor's mother. Her daughter, the wife of the prince, Katerina. The queen of Masawa, Lesabeta. The others, each their name. Okay, and thereafter, she asked us to give her the little child Jesus to keep in place of her idols. There, my dear friends, you have the formal mention of how Mary came with Christianity to our islands. And it is in connection with the first baptism. And it was specifically the manifestation of the goodwill of the foreigners sharing their own faith and religion with the natives. And here, as by way of gifts, the statue of the child Jesus, the famous Santo Niño de Cebu. And now the mysterious image of Our Lady. Why mysterious? Because it would not be as famous as the Santo Niño. However, there is another reference to our Blessed Mother. One day before Mass, so Pigafetta wrote, the Captain General had the king come clad in his silk robe, and so forth and so on. The captain made them all swear to be obedient to their king, and they kissed the latter's hand. Then the captain had the king declare that he would always be obedient and faithful to the king of España. And the king so swore. Thereupon, the captain drew his sword before the image of Our Lady and told the king that when anyone so swore, he should prefer to die rather than to break such an oath. If he swore by that image, that is the second appearance of Our Lady in the unfolding relationship between the Spaniards and the locals. The second time around, it was part of this Spanish ritual symbolism to take an oath by the image of the Mother of Jesus, to underline the earnestness of the oath. Why did I say the mysterious lady? Because the question is, what image of Our Lady was that? And how come that later on, when upon the return of the Spaniards, 40 years later, under the command of Legazpi, when they re-entered Cebu, when they reconquered Cebu, we may say that because with Legazpi, it was a little bloody. There was burning and there was bombarding. They found, the Spaniards did, quartered among the houses later, one of the Spaniards in a better built native house found in a chest the original infant Jesus that Magellan gave to the Queen of Cebu. But there was no mention at all about the rediscovery of the image of Our Lady. Later on, however, we would hear in the report of the Spaniards about their settling down in Cebu. Because, as I mentioned, it was more bloody, the return of the Spaniards under the command of Legazpi. And the Cebuanos returned the favor in kind. They started fighting back, harassing the Spaniards, and that is why the need for a fortification became very, very clear. And so the oldest Spanish fortification in the Philippines, in Cebu, later on to be called Fort San Pedro, would begin in construction. Legazpi himself and his own master of the camp, they stake out the three-cornered bastion. With three bastions, the three-cornered fortification, protection on the seaside, and then the two protection from the land, the two sides. And it was then that the Spaniards found their supply, and especially their powder, their weapons, more security with the first version of Fort San Pedro in forms of coconut trunks and trees that they have therefore put up as palisades against attack from outside by the natives. It is one requirement of a fortification that it be assured of water supply. And the exact location of Fort San Pedro was necessitated precisely by the presence of water supply. There was that well, the stream, where later on, from the bottom of the well, the Spaniards would rediscover the statue of Mary that was mentioned twice in the narration by Pigafetta. First at the baptism, and then later when there was an additional swearing done by Magellan and the chieftains to remain faithful to the King of Spain. This image, found already now inside the Spanish fortification, was for the Spaniards a good sign that they have Mary, the mother of Jesus, with them, protecting them. And so the image would be popularly known as Nuestra Señora de la Cota. There would be another one in Mindanao later, but the first image in the Philippines of Our Lady to be called de la Cota was the one rediscovered by the Spaniards in Cebu in the years between 1565 and 1569. So that was the time when, during the stronger construction of the fortification, actually Legazpi was not in Cebu anymore, because Legazpi had to move on to Panay, where there was greater source of provisions. And then from Panay would proceed in fact to Manila by 7071. Nuestra Señora de la Cota. And the question is, what image was this of Our Lady? Later on, this image would be, so to say, moved out of the Spanish edifice, the fortification, into the prayer house of the natives in the Basilica, the Metropolitan Basilica of Cebu. And there in the Capilla del Bautismo, the Bautisterio, but this time under a different name, Nuestra Señora de los Remedios. That would be the name. Under the care of the Spaniards, Nuestra Señora de la Cota, when the image now was, so to say, taken over by the Cebuanos in their own place, in their own church, it eventually came to be known as Nuestra Señora de los Remedios, Our Lady of Help, Our Lady of Remedies, Our Lady, the first version, the forerunner of Our Lady of Perpetual Help. That is Mary as the ever faithful protectress, helper of all her children in need. The experience of the Cebuanos, of the many help of Mary, made that name Remedios most justified. But still, the question remains, what kind of image was this that came to be known explicitly as De La Cota, and then later by the Filipinos themselves as De Los Remedios? We have a clue that later on, when this image of De Los Remedios disappeared during the Second World War, that is very interesting that this image would have such a very colorful, dramatic history behind it. The Spanish period, the rediscovery at the bottom of the well, the transfer to the cathedral, the disappearance during the war. And it was in my interviews with Monsignor Chris Garcia, who used to be then in charge of the Archdiocesan Liturgical Commission, that I learned from him the more or less the story why the De Los Remedios statue disappeared from the baptistry of the cathedral. That during the Second World War, for safekeeping, the statue was handed over to the great Cebuano politician, faithful, Sergio Osmeña, for safekeeping. Sergio Osmeña then was on the way out, ordered by General MacArthur to escape, to join Quezon in the United States. And it was said that before departure, the old Osmeña handed the statue to one of the people in Cebu. And that was the last word about it. There was no more recollection or recovery. And the statue has disappeared up to now without a trace. But again, when the statue resurrected, how the Cebuanos, in their own love for Nuestra Señora de los Remedios, as the development for Nuestra Señora de la Cota, as the recovery of the original statue of Our Lady, given as a gift at the baptism of the Queen of Cebu. When the Cebuanos, in their own religiosity, tried to recover this symbol of our Blessed Mother, they very, very significantly went for the image of Guadalupe, so that Cebu actually would declare Guadalupe as its principal patroness. And the question is, how come Guadalupe became the patroness? Because Guadalupe is the resurrected image of De Los Remedios, of De La Cota, of that mysterious image of Our Lady from the very beginning of Christianity 500 years ago, that started in Cebu. Why Guadalupe? Which Guadalupe is the question. It is not the Guadalupe of Mexico, as I have here in the image behind me. It is rather the Guadalupe of Cáceres in Spain, Cáceres in Estremadura. Why this particular image? That is the original Guadalupe. As you know very well, my dear friends, the Guadalupe of Mexico was only a nominal adaptation, only in name. The Mexican Guadalupe is very different from the original Guadalupe of Spain. The original Guadalupe of Spain is Mary with the child Jesus in her arm. And it is why did it come to the Philippines at all? Because of one very interesting item in history. We know, for example, that the great Spanish navigators, starting with Columbus, Christopher Columbus, that traveling from Madrid, where they get all their papers, they have therefore to travel southwest to reach the sea, to begin to take over their fleet and to begin their expedition overseas. You cut across the central part of Spain, and then in that western section, you come upon Cáceres. And in Estremadura, there is that famous convent of Guadalupe, Nuestra Señora de Guadalupe. Interestingly, my dear friends, do you know that later on in the development of Christianity in our country, for example, in Bohol, where you have the Augustinian friars Christianizing and evangelizing the whole island, doon sa Lubok, in Lubok, the patroness is Nuestra Señora de Guadalupe, de Lubok. And this is not the Mexican Guadalupe, but the original Spanish. And it is our Blessed Mother with the infant Jesus, with the child Jesus in her arm. And that, my dear friends, was the first image of Mary, so to say, to set foot on Philippine soil, coming with the first Christians who shared their faith with our ancestors. That is why when that image, that mysterious lady, not further identified by Pigafetta, when that image resurfaced, and this is the paradox, she resurfaced from the bottom of the well, of the pressed water well inside Fort San Pedro. When she resurfaced from the bottom of the well, it was as known Nuestra Señora de la Cota, our Blessed Mother with the child Jesus. And that is why the Nuestra Señora de los Remedios of the Cathedral of Cebu is Mary with the child Jesus. Very different from the De los Remedios today that we know of. For example, where do you have De los Remedios, Nuestra Señora de los Remedios today? In Malate, Ermita, in Parañaque, in Pampanga. Pampanga, oh, that is the patroness of the Archdiocese of San Fernando. The statue of Mary is Mary alone. Beautiful lady. That is De los Remedios. De los Remedios of Cebu was very different. It is with the child Jesus. That would be the oldest Our Lady of Remedies in the Philippines. And distinctly, it is very special. It is Mary with the child Jesus. The first image of Mary, she came to the Philippines with a child in her arm. sharing with us not only herself, but her child. And that is why Father Joseph's introductory remark kanina, I find that most significant. It must have been inspired by the Spirit that where Jesus is, there the mother would be. Where the mother is, there Jesus would be. Most true. Because that is actually the initial role of Mary, and that will be ever the role of Mary to bring Jesus to us. Now, I'm not just spiritualizing. What I am here talking about is the dimension and the meaning, the symbolism behind any image, any icon. The image of Mary, the oldest in the Philippines, is Mary with the child, Mary with Jesus. The mother came with her treasure, the child in her arm. But, and now, here is something that is worth our meditation, my dear friends, not only in Cebu, but throughout the Philippines, in meditating on our history, that in the course of time, Nuestra Señora de la Cota, aka also known as Nuestra Señora de los Remedios de Cebu, would disappear. And when it resurrected as Nuestra Señora de Guadalupe, there is something very strange. It is not the Guadalupe of Mexico. Guadalupe of Mexico portrays to us Mary as pregnant with Jesus. Our Lady of Guadalupe de Mexico carries within her body, next to her heart, the Son of God. In Mexico, Our Lady arrived, appeared, claimed the people, bringing with her the greatest treasure, the child in her womb. When the original Spanish Guadalupe arrived in the Philippines, to be known later as Nuestra Señora de la Cota and Nuestra Señora de los Remedios, she was with her child. But in the course of time, something happened. When Mary lost the child Jesus in the temple in Jerusalem, that was a great moment of anxiety. Can we speak of Mary losing the child Jesus in Cebu? Because the Guadalupe that later on would resurrect, repressing the memory of De la Cota and de los Remedios and the image of Our Lady given to the Queen of Cebu. When she reappeared, the beautiful Guadalupe of Cebu today. I have been to the parish. I have solemnized a marriage there once. And the beautiful pictures we have about Guadalupe de Cebu. There is a distinctive picture about it. It is unlike the Mexican Guadalupe, which is pregnant with Jesus, unlike the original Spanish Guadalupe, which is with Jesus in her arm. The Cebuano version of Guadalupe is without Jesus. Now, the long process, I have been wishing and dreaming of really having a heart-to-heart talk with the artist who first painted it, according to Monsignor Chris Garcia. some of the seminarians of Monsignor Garcia were my students at the Recoletos School of Theology. And I used to mention to them my desire to sit down and have a very close conversation with Monsignor. Why was that image that is supposed to be correctly the resurrection of De La Cota? Because De La Cota was actually the statue that the great Spanish explorers have the tradition of picking up from Guadalupe de Extremadura in Spain. They used to have it with them. That became a tradition of the explorers. They have a statue of Guadalupe from Extremadura in Spain. And it is Mary with her child. Why was it then separated from the child? Is it in imitation of the modern De Los Remedios? Now the name dictating a modification of the original. But what is my point here, my dear friends? As a theologian, as a Mariologist, I cannot just set this development aside as insignificant, but rather it is to me perhaps indicative of what actually was transpiring in the religiosity of our people. And what is it? Something that we are familiar with, worldwide development wherein Mary became so much central in our awareness that we are induced and attracted to meditate about her by herself and not always in conjunction with, in relation to, in the company of the Son, who alone gave her the meaning she had in salvation history. In fact, we know, and this is to be taken with a lot of pedagogical gratitude, that we are reminded again and again that it will not be good for Mariology to be torn apart from Christology. In fact, that is the direction in some faculties, that Mariology is taught as a subsection in Christology. We have to return Mary to Christ. Do we have to return Christ to Mary? In the case of the image so historical that first arrived in our country in relation to the first baptism, the beginning of Christianization. So that is, I am personally provoking this discussion because we need this discussion. No one has dared to open this can of worms, so to say. But I do believe we need to. And you will observe, my dear friends, that in my book, Shaping the Filipino Marian Piety, that Father Joseph referred to, that I have actually, in black and white, started to pose the questions and to delineate the development, the lines of development in my research about the whole issue. This is what Christianization in the concrete meant. Did it mean Mary losing Jesus in Cebu, as Mary once lost Jesus in Jerusalem? Now, that is only, oh my dear, my time. Am I still Do I still have my time? Very good. Give me, because we started late, so give me another 15 minutes because I would like to show you that what happened in Cebu is actually not a rarity. It's not unique. It's unique to the image of Mary. But that kind of development, is this what enculturation would mean? Looking back at the history of Mary in Cebu, do we have something parallel to this elsewhere? This kind of enculturation, adaptation, this kind of change introduced. Yes, I do believe so. And then from Cebu, we follow Legazpi, go north to Manila, where we know in 1571, the Spaniards claim to have found Mary already in place, being venerated by the natives. I'm referring to the image of Nuestra Señora de Guia that in May 16, 1571, was supposed to have been discovered by a couple of Spanish soldiers strolling along the beach and coming upon a group of natives venerating the image of Nuestra Señora de Guia on the stump of a tree. And I wish I had all the technical facilities to show you pictures. But anyway, that was something. For the Spaniards coming to Manila for the first time and discovering an image of Mary, their queen, their protectress, there already, ahead of them. What a miracle. What a cause for jubilation. Now they have Mary to protect them. Now they have Mary as their mother to look after them in this strange land, the farthest colony of the Spanish Empire. Yes, Manila was then the farthest colony across the ocean. And there Mary was waiting for them. What a miracle. And that was how the Spaniards understood the event. They discovered an image of Mary. And you know, up to now, for example, in the pastoral letter by the Bishops' Conference of the Philippines, that Nuestra Señora de Guia image is referred to as the most ancient. In fact, even more ancient than Nuestra Señora de la Cota in Cebu. Because according to the narration, the natives had this image, the Guia, already for generations. In other words, long before the Spaniards arrived in Cebu, the image was already in Manila. And so the speculations, folkloric legends proliferated, some saying that, oh, perhaps this image of our Blessed Mother was washed ashore from some unfortunate sinking Christian passengers in a ship. Or perhaps the Portuguese, whom we know had been making incursions into the Philippines, considering it as within their demarcation line. The division, remember, by Pope Alexander VI. No, they have been entering the Philippines, but particularly Mindanao, long before the Spaniards. Did they bring that here? Or was it the image in Cebu that was brought by the remnants of Magellan's fleet escaping back home, passing by Luzon? See, all is speculative. The group, the remnants of Magellan's group never passed by Luzon. There was no record to it. Portuguese never had the record of entering the island of Luzon. Wash away image from the sinking ship, that is pure flight of fancy. We have to look at the image. And my dear friends, that's what I have been doing. The image known as Nuestra Señora de Guía. When you remove all the Catholic accessories, the hair, the gown, the jewelry, the crown, when you remove all these Catholic additions, what you have is a curving, 40 centimeters of it. And do you know that it is made of wood, Asian wood, that the lower part of it is the equivalent of Nara. And strange, because you have to undress it. Yes, that is the term. No irreverence meant. But I have to undress images to examine closely, scientifically, the very icon, the very piece of religious artifact. Nuestra Señora de Guía is cut here at the torso. The wood in the lower part is of Nara, and the head is Mulabe. Both Asian wood, so it could not have come from Europe. And you know what it is? If you look at it closely, it is a typical Buddhist statue. It is an arat. It is a Buddhist sabah, a holy person who is dedicated to help people. And that image of Nuestra Señora de Guía with two large hands folded in front, that is a typical Buddhist gesture of prayerfulness. It is universal religious symbol. And the huge hands, in comparison, in proportion to the face, is to indicate that helping mission, postponing entering into nirvana, because that is the spirituality of Arat, a holy figure, a holy person, male or female. Yes, you cannot determine the sex because a Buddhist Saba is both male and female. Can be either. But this holy person postpones one's own bliss in nirvana by dedicating oneself to helping other people in the mercy, in the compassion mission. And so it was here because we know the Buddhists have been around earlier than the Christians, and in fact, even earlier than Islam. Except that here in the Philippines, unlike, for example, in Indonesia or in the Indochina Peninsula, in Cambodia, in Myanmar, in Vietnam, where you have a lot of ruins, archaeological ruins, indicating the presence of the strong influence of Buddhism. We do not find that here in our country. But that the traders, that travelers from all over Asia also arriving here in Luzon, we know that. The Chinese have been here long before anybody else. And so the Spaniards very clearly chance upon a remnant of Buddhism. And the natives have received that heritage, that the tradition, that this is an image of someone to help anyone asking for help. And that's why there is the veneration of the native. We know very well that the natives of Manila during the coming of the Spaniards, you get the upper class, they had connection with Islam, and the ordinary people, they were, so to say, the animists, the locals. And you get some foreigners, some Chinese, they have been around. So there is that question of Buddhism also being around. But the beautiful thing is, the Spaniards saw the image, it is Asian, the cheeks are chubby. You can easily, as we know that, you can easily, you cover it with shawl and it can look very feminine, even if it is masculine. And so the conclusion, Mary, this is an icon of Mary, the mother of Jesus and our mother. Hallelujah. And so we have here what? An adaptation. We have here something that is belonging to another religion, welcomed by the Christians more out of ignorance, and baptizing it, literally, so to say, giving it a new identity. And so what would later on be known as Nuestra Señora de Guía, and popularly under that name, the protectress of travelers, the protectors, that's why Guía, guidance, to guide all of us, to guide the galleon trade. Yes, for hundreds of years, the patroness and protectress of the galleon trade between Acapulco and Manila, the lifeline that kept the Spanish government functioning in the colony. That this, Our Lady of Guidance, Nuestra Señora de Guía, could actually be called our patroness of enculturation, way ahead of what today our bishops, the theologians, are asking for. You know what that is? Dialogue between religions, interreligious dialogue, enculturation, receiving what is from the people that is compatible with our faith. What from them can enrich Christianity, and what of our faith can enrich the culture, the religiosity, the ordinary piety of the people. That is now where mission stands, where evangelization and Christianization leads us to be focusing on. And it is here, my dear brothers and sisters, that I believe this brief discussion about a couple of images in the Philippines, very historical, but their lines of development, for me, providentially, highly significant and indicative of lines of adaptation, of contextualization, of enculturation. So way ahead of time, because it's only now that this has become our current hashtag, enculturation. Without enculturation, there is no real evangelization taking place. Unless what is of our faith is integrated into the culture, then it is not real to the people. Then it is not yet really lived by the people. When does Mary become enculturated, integrated into the Filipino existence? I think that has solidly begun with Mary coming as our mother, the mother of our Savior and our mother too. And that is the imperative of the very name Guadalupe. In Spain, Mary with the child Jesus. In Mexico, Mary pregnant with Jesus. And that's why we are warned. This development in Cebu, where Jesus disappears from the arms of Mary. What could have led to it? We must make sure it does not mean something more serious. It can be something serious. And so that is part of the years of Christianization. You come upon a very beautiful line of growth and development, progress and deepening, or you can also come upon a vein that is rather dubious. Why this? Where will it lead us? And I think with regards the Filipinos and Mary, we need this kind of discernment and self-examination, so that it's not Mary only in the past 500 years, so that we can speak of Mary in the next 500 years of Christianity for our people. Amen. Naku, pasensya na kayo. Napakarami pong pwedeng pag-usapan, but we have limited time. So what do we have now? An open forum. I welcome any question. Amy, nariyan ka pa ba? Okay. Si Father Joseph, umalis na.
Hindi pa, Father. He's just beside me.
Okay,
Anyway,
so do you have any question? I cannot hear you.
bef-
I cannot hear you.
Okay. Can you hear me now, Father, Monsignor? Okay.
There.
There.
Good.
Before we go to our Q&A, Monsignor, daghan kaayong salamat for this lecture this afternoon. I myself actually took a lot of, how do you call this, Father, points, and no, I even wrote them down, and it's a very full afternoon. In fact, we also saw in our chat group here in Zoom and also comments in Facebook, there are many who are thanking you, Monsignor, for this lecture, because of course it led them to think, reflect about the role of Mary in the lives of the Filipinos, in their own lives. It also reminded them about certain obligations, I think, because like one seminarian who mentioned here, thank you, you reminded me of an unfinished thesis. Something about Marian apparitions, and then understanding the role of Mary as model of inculturation. And we're talking of inculturation, Monsignor. I think it is very important that you highlighted that, because it is related to evangelization. You mentioned that at the start. Mission. And of course, our theme for the 500 years is gifted to give. So
Sure. Fire away. Title. Another title.
Guadalupe in Cebu, which is more not related to the Guadalupe in Mexico, but that of Caceres, Spain, Extremadura. Are you saying, Monsignor, that, of course, I think you're not saying that it's one and the same image. It's more like just the appearance of the mother in the lives of the Cebuanos, or in the history of the Cebuanos. Is this what you are saying, Monsignor?
Yes. Well, the image itself, the artifact, that piece of wood that came from Spain, that got lost. That is now beyond recovery. But before it disappeared, it underwent transformation in the faith and in the experience of the Cebuanos. It was, in the beginning, on the part of the Spaniards, the colonizers, their protectress, de la Cota, Nuestra Señora de la Cota. It is their Cota. The fortification San Pedro was there. It was residential area for the protection of the Spaniards, like Intramuros in the beginning here in Manila. Okay, but much smaller. When later on, the fortress ceased to be functional, Nuestra Señora de la Cota, therefore, lived in an empty house. And that's why it was moved to the Basilica. And in moving it to the Basilica, it is now for the people, for the Cebuanos. And there it acquired a new identity. The experience of the people in faith, the remedies, the help, the miracles of Mary for them. Oh, that justified calling her no longer de la Cota, but de los Remedios. But then, war, and she disappeared. Was it negligence? Is it just mishap? Whatever happened, she could no longer be found. I do believe there must be more investigation about that particular angle, because we know Monsignor Garcia said it was handed over to Osmeña. So that's very specific. And you have this very narrow window of time from the time it was handed over until it took eventually the submarine to escape. We know that. Sino yung mga kaibigan, kasamahan ng matanda na maaaring inabutan? Sapagkat it will always be an issue. It's a baggage. But anyway, so it disappeared. Then the memory of Mary, that is what had been, that it would not disappear. The memory of Mary as Nuestra Señora de los Remedios, so much part of the life of the people in Cebu.
Yeah.
And that is why Cebu, there was this crystallization of desire. The image, there is here, if I may say so, there is here partly guilty feeling. Di ba, no? Nawala yung mama mo. Paano mo ipapaliwanag? Nasaan yung mama mo? Okay. And then, so the desire to resurrect. And that's it. Do you know that there is an ancient tradition that De la Cota was also known as Guadalupe? And that during that time, it was known as De los Remedios among, for example, I found this out, among the Agustinians. And they're very much present in Cebu. It's a very clear tradition among them that the original image of Mary was that of Guadalupe in Spain. Oh, I consider that a very strong factor. Why? During the discussion, how shall we have Mary? And then it must be Guadalupe. It is now back to the original. The unnamed original is now coming back. Now this time named. But in the process, there was a modification done. And what was it? The disappearance of Jesus. Is it divine providence or human negligence?
You are referring to to the disappearance of Jesus in the
Of
image
Jesus.
of the Guadalupe po,
Of the Guadalupe.
Yeah,
Because the
she's
original
missing the-
Guadalupe is with the child.
the child.
Now your Guadalupe of Cebu is a beautiful lady, all in the grandeur of herself.
Yes. But maybe if I don't know if you can see it as a sort of answer to the reflection you gave us, Monsignor, about losing Jesus, no? And you reminded us that we should not deviate our devotion to Mary from our adoration for the Son, for Christ.
Yes.
But we have this tradition in Cebu, and I think you have heard of it, how the mother during the Feast of the Señor actually goes to the Basilica at the start
Yeah.
of the Fiesta Señor and visits and goes to the Son, actually. So in a sense, it's a reminder for us Cebuanos that the mother is never far from the Son.
Yes, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. We have that also here with Nazareno, and then Our Lady of Del Carmen in San Sebastian. But it dates back to the Intramuros Spanish period. But I wish I have the time. I'll give you a meditation on the perspective of Saint Matthew's Gospel. How when Saint Matthew portrayed Joseph as the caretaker of the mother and her child, of the child Jesus and his mother, always the two, they are inseparable. The child and his mother, the mother and the child, always. That is Matthean, that is inspired, and that is a very important point to keep in Mariology, whether theologically or in popular piety and popular religiosity.
Thank you for that, Monsignor. No, you're telling us that this is actually a Matthean inspired. Ito
Oh, yes.
yung the mother looking for the son, going to the son. But second thing, Monsignor, this is also what I have noticed with because you shared about the history of the Blessed Mary's images here in Cebu and connected them. I also noticed that when the Cebuanos gave the title of De los Remedios and also to Guadalupe, they were all actually connected with cures and healings, actually, because you mentioned De los Remedios is for the sick. She is called upon, no, for in times of sickness. The Guadalupe dito sa Cebu also became, I think that the devotion picked up sometime during a cholera epidemic here in Cebu. So always the mother is connected to healing, to always called upon in times of sickness. That's
Yes.
also interesting. You connected
Yes.
that.
I know the legend, how the image of Guadalupe was found by a native, so near a river, where you now have the parish nearby.
Yeah.
The parish of Guadalupe, and this refers to that what you may call collective memory. In anthropology, a people, their culture is sometimes captured and crystallized in what remains as their this anamnesis, the recollection, the remembrance. It defines you. Without memory, then there is no recovery and there is no progress to be made. Yun. Kaya yung matatanda ay napakahalaga, sapagkat yung matatanda, sila yung kadluan ng alaala. Sila yung sisidlan ng nakalipas. At iyan ang nakikita ko, that in Cebu, that it is at play, at work, this interplay between the past, the memory of the past, and the imperatives of the present. And yet, the present is very much just a continuation of the past. And that is why the the lessons of the past, the memories of the past defines to us where we can move on in the present and into the future.
And I think it's very important, Monsignor, saying that, no, that the mother is constantly invoked in this time of the pandemic too. So it's always been done in the past. It's also still done
Yes.
in the present.
Mm-mm.
And it's interesting that you gave another side to what inculturation means, Monsignor, by giving the example of the Nuestra Senora de Guia. Another aspect of inculturation that you have an image coming from maybe from somewhere in Asia because it has Asian influences. It's made of Asian wood. It's Buddhist of make. And then now it has become, for us, it has been translated or transformed into the image of the mother. That's another
Yes.
aspect of inculturation. Kanina, you had history and the meaning, and now we have really something else, an image that's really different but has been transformed into the image of the mother. Very interesting.
Yes. Nuestra Senora de Guia is waiting to be the patroness of the overseas Filipinos
Yes.
so that they are guided to return home to their families. Some of them get lost. And so that in the globalization of the world, where our being pilgrims, travelers, now become so accentuated existentially, we need the presence of Mary, Nuestra Senora de Guia, to guide us along the path so that we will always reach our destination.
Yeah. I think I agree with that also, Monsignor, because, well, you come home, you need a guidance to come home, and we will invoke the mother to bring us home.
And in this context, Heidi, I would just call the public, if you're interested to follow through and read more my lines of thinking and research, the book that won the Best Book in Theology Prize, Shaping the Filipino Marian Piety, I invite you. St. Paul, the Society of St. Paul published it. You might be interested. You want to go deeper into scientific Mariology.
Yes. I was about to say, Monsignor, I learned about how a different image from another culture has become transformed into the mother, no? The image of the mother. I learned that actually from your book. I read it, Father, Shaping the
Oh,
Filipino
very good.
Marian Piety. Thank you for that book.
Okay,
Monsignor.
thank you. Salamat sa inyo. God bless you.
But Monsignor, maybe we will just entertain this question. This actually popped up, but we sort of answered this. But maybe just to emphasize the answer, where can we find the original image of Guadalupe? Someone is asking in our chat group. Brought by the Spaniards here in the Philippines, in Cebu. Probably this comes from a non-Cebuano.
Yes, that's right. The image is lost. And so the image lives in the heart of the Cebuanos. That is my next statement. The artifact has been lost. And the image, however, the mother, the woman, and her child remains in the heart, in the memory of the Cebuano culture. It's because Cebuano history is part of your Cebuano culture, and it is strongly Marian. Now, however, there must be a certain completion of memory, because you cannot recall just the mother without the child. We must get the child back.
We have to find the child. And with that, Monsignor, we'd like to thank you for spending time with us this afternoon. As Father Jojo de Aquino mentioned, you're our first resource speaker who is not Cebuano. Parang national na ito because we got you, Monsignor, and thank you for accepting our invitation and for giving us this many points that we can reflect on in this as we celebrate the 500 years of Christianity in the Philippines, this time about the role of the mother in the lives of the Filipinos. And so again, if you want to learn more about the premise that Monsignor mentioned, get the copy of the book. It's available actually. I was passing by St. Paul's, Father. So many copies. I've been one of those who have been buying them to give to friends also. And thank you for that, Monsignor.
Okay.
All right. And so we'd like to thank also everyone who are part of our webinar this afternoon. May I just say that we have another webinar this coming Saturday, February 20. And this time, it will be about the 500 years of secular clergy in the Philippines. And our speaker will be none other than Father Ramon D. Ichica, the Dean of Studies of the Seminario Mayor de San Carlos. And this afternoon, we are all very thankful for our sponsor also, Mr. Jojo and Mrs. Gina Villarin. Daghan kayong salamat for helping us this afternoon. In behalf of the Archbishop of Cebu, Archbishop Jose Palma, Father Mar Balili, who is also the overall chair of the 500 Years of Christianity in the Philippines celebration here in the Archdiocese of Cebu, Father Jojo de Aquino, who is the head of the social media activities for the 500 Years of Christianity celebration here in the Archdiocese of Cebu. We'd like to thank everyone, and we hope to see you next Saturday. I'd also like to thank our friends from the Singles for Christ Cebu who really ensured that this webinar it becomes a reality this afternoon, for ensuring that everything flows smoothly. And with that, daghang salamat sa tanan, and we'll see you next Saturday. God bless you.